for the first 140 years of our country included the right to ingest whatever chemicals you wished. Only in 1914 did that change, and the change is probably the most radical public policy change in the history of the United States.
The Harrison Tax Act is the first step in making drugs illegal nationwide. Under the new law, to use an opiate, you must be a patient. To sell or prescribe it, you must get a license and pay a tax. And not everyone is granted a license. It's at the government's discretion. The phrase illegal possession, a term unknown before the Harrison Act, becomes a part of the new language of drug law and a new precedent for drug enforcement agents to send people to jail.
What the government essentially did was it criminalized conduct of maybe 100 to 200,000 people who were using opiates prior to the passage of the Harrison Act. Within a few years after the passage of this supposedly revenue issue, Treasury agents, federal agents working with local police managed to shut down all of the drug clinics. The religious groups and the federal cops had no intention of letting drug users be viewed as patients. They were criminals. They were evil, immoral people. They had to be locked up.
The Harrison Tax Act creates criminals out of users and addicts. But the most frequently arrested for violation of the new law controlling opiates are medical doctors. 10,000 have been arrested within the first 5 years of the law's passage. The basis for the arrests is the language in the law that states opiates, quote, can only be prescribed in the due course of medical treatment. That phrase results in thousands of doctors going to jail. So controversial and unclear is the interpretation of that phrase, the law eventually ends up before the Supreme Court.
In the mid-1920s, the Supreme Court, in a case called Webb, said that the dispensation of these drugs to patients for maintenance purposes, that is, for maintaining addicts, was not the legitimate practice of medicine and therefore was not permitted by the Act. That's how drug prohibition began.
Heroin in the 1920s is stigmatized forever. By 1923, half of the inmates at the federal penitentiary at Leavenworth, Kansas, are jailed on federal drug violations.